Hey everybody, welcome to the Educated Black Men podcast. We're your host, David Clark.
Cedric Harris.
Armand Gasparini.
Who is the one non-black guy.
I am not black.
We should probably give you a nickname like Not Black Armin.
Not Black Armand.
Educated Black Men plus one.
Yeah,
Plus one.
plus one Armin.
Plus the token.
Parentheses,
Plus
who's
an Armin.
also educated.
Educated Armin.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah. It's
No,
gonna be like the LGBT thing. It's going to be longer and longer every episode.
No, I really
Yes.
think I should be called
Yes.
the token white guy. I think this is great.
Hey,
Token
yes.
white
You know,
Token-
you remember
token
when
white guy.
when it was officially announced that whites are now a minority in Los Angeles?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that felt
Right?
interesting. I'm like, hey,
You're like,
I'm in a minority.
do I get
Right.
affirmative action now?
Yes,
Like, this
right.
works? I mean, because technically, I guess,
You are a minority now.
So,
right?
but
In
today,
LA.
today we're talking about something that's been popping up lately with all the black events, and by events I mean traumatizing things on Facebook, where people are talking about black and police crime, and then people retort with black on black crime. So we're gonna be talking just about generally how we feel about it, and try and put everything into perspective a little bit. So. Who wants to start? Who feels the strongest about this?
I'll jump off. I guess I'll be the jump off.
Jump off that diving board.
Yes, I'll take that leap first. Well, I think one thing that always pops up is people say, well, blacks commit the most crime. Hispanics commit the most crime. So that's why you need police officers there. And while the stats may say that, yeah, when you look kind of inside the stats, it's all they do is sit in neighborhoods looking for black and brown people. And if you just sit at one lake fishing all day, you're going to catch fish over and over again. You think, that's the best lake, I'm catching all these fish here. But then you never go into other areas to know that there's other fish doing other things. And studies shown most shoplifters, or the average shoplifter, is a middle-aged white woman. Whites and blacks and Hispanics use drugs at similar rates. But Hispanics and blacks get caught more for it, mostly because that's what they're looking for. So if you go looking for it, obviously you're going to find it.
And I think we all do different crimes. Like, black people do like regular crimes where like they kill people and steal stuff.
Crimes of opportunity.
But like sometimes white people be going like their crimes are like, I just killed 40 people and hung them in my basement, or like I have pet women that I've kept here
In my
for
basement.
like it's like
we're overachievers as white people.
like if we're gonna do crime, it's gonna be the best
It's gonna
crime.
be the most crime.
Give me the best criminal you can
there,
be.
there is that stereotype of like whites are always serial killers, or like serial killers are always white, which isn't true actually. But
but that is like that was like the FBI profile
Yeah.
for serial
yeah,
killers.
in fact,
40
when they had
and
the
like,
white guy.
the DC snipers, they were looking for white
they
guys.
thought he was white.
They thought he was white.
And when he was black, look, I'm telling you, look, in the black community, when we thought he was black, we were like, what?
And then
we
the-
don't do that.
Then the news media dropped off.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we can't spend that
And
one.
because they're like, he's calculating and cool, and
Right.
oh, he's a black guy, never mind.
Nope.
Wait, are you saying that they should like compliment? They were avoiding
Well, they're like-
complimenting these guys?
But
Yes.
It's like, no, we can't say nice things about
Right.
a black person. What?
they're like, no, we can't give him all that
All
credit.
that
I can give him
credit.
all that
But
credit.
no, but that was a weird moment. I found
It
he was
was.
black. I was like, but like, did he not get the memo? We don't do that.
We don't take rifles and
we
start
do
shooting people.
regular crime,
Yeah, like normal stuff, like
like murder
like
and
drive-bys and
robbery.
Stealing.
But now, I mean, I know people always say stuff like, why aren't we worried about black on black crime? And my thing is, I am worried about black on black crime because I am black and I would like to not have black crime happen to me. But my whole thing is, when we're mad about these certain things that pop up, we're mad about like that specific thing right now. But and I always feel like people say, well, what about black on black crime as a way to like divert from that one thing? But what do you think though?
Well, here's the thing. When people bring up the black on black crime rates, right? What they're essentially arguing, more or less boiled down, is that they feel like there is a misprioritization. So, for example, blacks represent about 13% of the population. About over 50% of murders are committed by blacks. Actually, really black men mostly. So about 6.5% of the population committing 50% of all murders, which is
Finished murders.
yeah, and then you got essentially about 4,000 blacks every year die from murder, are murdered every year. I think in Chicago, like every 45 minutes, some guy gets shot. And so if your slogan is Black Lives Matter, and you don't talk about this, and you don't bring this up, it does raise some eyebrows at a certain point. I understand the frustration in the sense that, look, I'm talking about police brutality. I'm not talking about crime statistics, but they go hand in hand, because if you have a population that has a very high crime rate, they're going to have a lot more contact with the police. And if you have a lot more contact with the police, the frequency of these incidents happening are going to naturally increase. So any honest assessment of this problem, like I hear a lot of people rattle off statistics about how many blacks end up going to prison, how many blacks are arrested, and how often they're pulled over, but no one follows that up with the ugly statistic no one wants to bring up, is that 50% of murders committed by such a tiny portion of the population.
Right. Well, one thing I want to know is how many blacks are actually committing this crime, because I feel like it's probably just a small section who just are very active, because I know a lot of black people. I'm related to a bunch of them, and I don't know anyone who's doing any of this stuff.
Well, that's probably because you're not the type of person to engage in that kind of behavior, and you don't associate with people who engage in that kind of behavior.
Well, not only that, but we do talk about it, and a lot of the times, I just saw an interview with Jim Brown, the football player and civil rights activist, and he was saying, we need to deal with the problems in our neighborhood, and that's one thing as communities we look at differently. We look at quote unquote black on black crime as our problem. But when Dylan Roof shoots up a church, or when the Aurora shooter shoots up a theater, or when someone white, Timothy McVeigh, blows up a building, when someone's white, they go, oh, he did it. He's a lone wolf. It's his problem.
Which maybe we should start doing.
And, he's saying he's not representative of us. And one bigger problem is that when one black person does something, they apparently speak for the whole race. But I think as a community, as black people, we need to say, no, that guy is crazy. He's not us.
Right.
He's the lone wolf.
Right.
That does not represent the larger
We're talking about that earlier. We don't want to be lumped in, so we shouldn't own that as a community problem.
Yeah. It's not a community problem. It's a he's crazy problem.
At a certain point, though, when you have such a high crime rate, it does become... And the reason it becomes a community problem is this is not something that an outside group can solve, right? Like, whites can't come in and say, woof, we're going to fix your problem. This is something that starts within the community, and it has to... It starts with people making different choices about their lives, and which in turn translates into different choices about their children's lives and their grandchildren's lives, and that's a big project, essentially.
Well, I don't think as a community we're asking for white people to come in and whoosh, just I dream a genie and it's gone. We for the most part, black communities have been wanting to take care of themselves, and the problem is there are high crime stats, and like David said earlier, how many of these black people are actually committing these crimes? Because it's very easy in today's society to go, oh, it was, still, not even today. Since slavery was abolished, it's been real easy to go, look at that brown or black guy. He did it. Okay, I believe you because they're not trustworthy. And going back to my earlier point, if you stay in one area, they did a study in New Jersey on traffic stops. They stopped 56% of their stops were Hispanic or black. Hispanic and blacks only made up for 4% of that community. The community was majority white. But the traffic cops only sat in the black and Hispanic neighborhoods looking for people. They didn't go to the white part of town looking for people, even though I've driven with a lot of white people, and I know white people, black people, Asians, we're all horrible drivers, and we all speed and do horrible things on the road.
Except for me.
So, they're going to, and that's just traffic violations. And they're like, well, obviously, if you're going to spend all your time in one area looking for one thing, the stats are going to say they do it more because that's all you're looking for.
Well, what's interesting about that, a couple of things. One, you have the FBI stats and then you have the National Crime Victimization Survey. And the two match up and they both have different methodologies. The Crime Victimization Survey is essentially reports, right? So, and a lot of these reports, I mean, what people don't realize is that blacks call the police a lot, right? Obviously. Yeah. So it seems to me that there doesn't seem to be a disparity in the sense that that blacks are being over-arrested, right? In that, a lot of innocent blacks are being swept up into this. It seems like the conviction reports and the victimization reports, which were, this guy attacked me, are pretty close to the point where there seems to not be any sort of what's the word? I don't know, malfeasance or whatever. Right, but the other thing is, if you're talking about cops parked in minority neighborhoods, you have to realize that police departments have limited resources. And if they're going to spend those limited resources effectively, they generally go to places where there's a lot of crime, right? A lot of people, if
based on the stats,
based on the statistics that they're looking at, of course,
yes.
Because the idea starting in the 90s was essentially policing needed to take a scientific turn, right? And so they would use essentially statistics to sort of predict where crime would be, and that it made their police departments more efficient. And so the answer to that question is, well, cops go where the crime is. It's like saying, why are there more squad cars in Compton than there are in Beverly Hills? Well, because Compton's where the crime is at. And finally,
it's also Beverly Hills is where the money's at. But
well, I mean, Beverly Hills is not known for being a crime-ridden neighborhood.
White collar crime.
Well, probably yes, but not violent crime that needs big patrol cars.
Well, and see, I think that's another thing too, is because as a society we look at blue collar crime, which is what we were joking about earlier, is normal crime.
Right.
And then there's white-collar crime. And blue-collar crime is, I take your wallet, Armin, I beat you up, I run away, I go to jail for 12 to 15 years for assault and armed robbery, and then I get out and have trouble finding a job. But if you worked at Goldman Sachs, fiddled around with some numbers, screwed not only my family, but thousands of other families out of millions of dollars, you can pay a fine. And it's like,
well, it depends. I mean, there have been people.
There have been, but in general, there's not the same stigma of
look,
crime.
The big issue goes, the black crime problem, which we will be doing a whole episode on problems in the black community, but the big issue is, in the instance of black on black crime, more likely than not, the person who did it gets caught and goes to jail. So while we are upset at that thing, justice was served. Sometimes not, but most of the time it is. But the difference between that and when there's a police shooting, a lot of times, at least now that we're seeing it on camera in our Facebook feeds, there isn't justice done, and that's what's upsetting. Is that it's not that it happens, like it happens. Look, that's a whole other problem, but they get punished. It seems the cops can do some horrible things on camera and then not get punished.
It depends entirely on the case. Like I bring up a lot the case in North Carolina with that officer Slager who shot what's his name
in the back.
Yeah. Michael Scott, I believe.
Yeah. It's hard to keep on the cases.
I think that in cases where it's unequivocally obvious, that was murder. People are swift, and I mean that guy is going to get tried for first degree murder in October. So and that's not manslaughter, second degree.
Yeah.
That's you could get fried if the judge says so.
That's 25 to life. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the problem is you have what I refer to as contentious police shootings, where it's not particularly clear what happened, and you have sort of a he said situation where a lot of different facts are being thrown around, and those things become very obscure and obfuscated, and inevitably what ends up happening is people react emotionally to the first thing they hear, and then there's an overreaction. I mean, how many unjustified shootings have we had in this year? Let's just assume every contentious shooting. So for example, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, who else was?
We're at least over 30, so it's going to
Okay,
be a while
30.
if you're going to name them all.
So 30 people, let's say,
Around
okay,
there, I'm
30
estimating.
people, and let's just assume all of them are 100% unjustified, meaning not only did the people who were shot do nothing wrong, but the cops had no reason to think they were doing wrong, right? That is a small number compared to 4,000 a year.
Well, let's talk about numbers, because if we're talking about black on black crime, and that's the reason why police need to be there, is because of all these shootings and all the crime that happens in the black community. When you look at the numbers, more white people are killed every year by the police. They are the bigger part of the population, but they are killed more by the police. And more white people kill police than any other group. So, if the theory that police need to be in the black community because that's where the crime is, then the police need to be watching white people because they're the ones who are going to shoot them.
Well, but also whites are, if we're going to talk about how often whites shoot at police, they're also a bigger population.
Well, but just the numbers are, they shoot more people. The majority of crime, you said, happens in black communities. That's why the police are there. If the majority of white shootings are at police, or if the majority of white people shoot police and try and kill them, should we not be policing them more?
The majority of whites, or just a lot of whites?
The majority.
I think the majority of police shootings.
Okay, because I
Yes,
don't even think a majority of blacks shoot at cops.
So you're more likely to be, as a cop, more likely to be shot by a white person than by a black person.
So if that's the case,
I'd have to check those numbers. I'll take your word for it right now. But okay, hypothetically, yes, right? But again, I mean, here's this. I think part of it is that, in black communities, unfortunately, you have concentration that happens.
you have concentration of communities everywhere.
Yeah.
I could go to Porter Ranch and there's a collection of white people.
But is Porter Ranch a very high crime? I don't know. Maybe it is. But
There's a lot of crime that goes on up there, but it's not the type of crime you see in Compton because they're not crimes of opportunity.
Sometimes it's the kind of crime that takes a decade to come out.
Or, yeah, right?
Where it's like
Yeah.
someone checks something like, wait a minute, you've been doing XYZ for a long
decade.
time.
and of course, those
or-
are harder to solve.
Right.
And they're
Yes.
and,
Right.
and
But I mean, and a lot of our frustration also comes from the fact that we have, our people have a background of our lives in this country being disposable, and after a long time of that just being your history, and some of it happening as recent as 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, yesterday.
Yeah.
It's like, you're always reminded of that fact that for a long time people have been killing black people and getting away with it. And I mean, for example, there was a report the FBI did, I think it was in 2006, where one of their concerns was that a lot of Klan members were infiltrating police departments.
Yeah.
So we see stuff like that, and then see stuff like we see on Facebook with the people getting killed now. We're like, we don't know which of you is Klan members. We don't know, which of you hate us. We don't know if our lives are going to be disposable today. So I mean, there's like for us, a lot of how we frame today is framed by what happened yesterday, because we listen. I mean, it's like with Asian people. They're they listen to their elders. Hispanics, they listen to the elders. Black people, we listen to our elders. It's our elders don't have a lot of great stories here.
No,
Not
always.
At a certain point, though, I mean, I would point out that yes, there has been historic oppression of blacks in the United States. There's been historical oppression of blacks in a lot of the world, but at the same time, I think to a large extent, white America has tried very, very hard to atone.
How?
Well, I see. I wouldn't say hard, because I mean.
I'd be fine with reparations.
Okay,
right.
Let's start. Civil War, 600,000, mostly whites, dead.
After the millions of people were shipped.
I don't think I don't think the individual person was there to free the slave. I think we were kind of like as a result, like hey, look, you happen to be free.
The reason forget about that. We talked about this on the last one, but for me, I look at history because it kind of tells us where we're going. The Germans, they just now apologized for the genocide in Nambia.
Nambia.
They just apologized for that. Germany has already apologized for the Holocaust. Germany has given reparations to families they could know that they knew were part of the Holocaust, and they've given money to foundations that help people from the Holocaust regardless.
Right.
And they've said something horrible about their history, accepted it, and said, listen, we're trying to help.
Right.
And they did something.
And don't forget, America made sure Native Americans got reservations, and
Well,
the
I
Japanese.
would not argue that the reservations were a good thing.
They could have been, but I think the Native Americans just didn't. That's a whole other conversation.
That's another
but
thing.
you know, but they were at least given something, and of course they were given casinos and all that stuff. And then they also gave the Japanese people reparations, which I don't think we should have given them. Sorry, we didn't know. Some of y'all may have been spies. You know, but it's like, but they always try and make up for it. But with us, it's like they figure if we just wait long enough, you know, it's kind of like with Turkey and the Armenian genocide, or with Japan, and their comfort women that they still haven't admitted to.
Yeah.
You know about the comfort women?
I know about the comfort women.
Yeah.
I would not argue that what the United States is doing with blacks is anywhere near the same as what Turkey did with the Armenians, in the sense that Turkey, you ask them genocide, they say nothing happened. And I think the United States does acknowledge that slavery happened. The question of reparations...
Some people.
Well, I mean,
The government does.
The government
Like,
does.
we're
and
still-
I
we're
would
still
say-
fine.
like in
I
some
would say
textbooks,
90%.
in some textbooks now, because Texas gets to decide the textbooks. They're starting to refer to slaves as either indentured servants or like migrant workers. Like they're not using the word slave.
I'd have to look into... I mean, indentured servant was a thing back then.
No, it was a
It was
thing.
a
Actually,
thing,
that's
but-
part of my family's history, but they're not referring it to the Northern Atlantic slave trade in textbooks. They're referring to it to the Northern Atlantic Trade Union that had nothing to do with slavery, albeit that their main cash crop was black people from Africa.
And
Well, if that's the case, that's silly.
It is.
But
that's where we're at.
But for the most part, like I guarantee you walk up to somebody and say, "Was there slavery in the United States?"
Yeah,
Like,
it was a good
right.
thing.
Well,
You know,
like,
someone's going to say that.
No,
what I meant by that is that
inevitably,
they try
yes.
they try and hide from the fact that the reason America became the powerhouse it did overnight in terms of broader history is because your workforce wasn't paid.
I'd actually disagree. I think slavery did a lot of damage to the United States overall because it prevented economic growth in the South. Because one of the things that slavery does, one of the negative side effects of slavery, is that it stifles innovation. Right? Like, for example, the Greeks could have had a steam engine. I mean, there were designs for a steam engine, but when they were talking about it, they were like, "Why do we need a steam engine? We have slaves, right?" So slaves not only slowed down innovation in the South, they ended up being a huge drain on their development as a culture. Also, the northern industry was not developed with slave labor. And if we want to talk
Completely. They were still slaves.
but if you want to talk about the industry in the South, post-Civil War, every single penny that was made by slave labor was burned to ashes. The South, after the Civil War, was a third world country for most of the rest of American history until a few decades ago. And so when I hear people say things like the United States, all of the United States' wealth was developed by slavery, I don't think you can make that argument if you actually know the history of how the Civil War ended and what happened.
Well, no, the Reconstruction was horrible, and the big part of it is that the labor force was no longer there, and all this trade that the South was doing was damaged because their workforce was no longer there. They couldn't have people go work the fields all day and then take that cotton, ship it somewhere, and then they make cloth, and then they can ship it back and rebuy it or sell whatever. Their economy tanked and that's what Lincoln knew. Lincoln knew, I'm taking away their workforce. And you take away the workforce, the middle class per se, your economy crumbles. And the fact that today we're still fighting to take down a flag that was an act of rebellion against the United States, and then still claim that, oh, well, it's an heritage of our rebellion against the states. But we're still fighting that fight, and we can't
Well-
come to terms on that, and we're like, well, we need to change these other things, and we're still fighting those fights.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot of
the
things going on.
Neo-Confederacy is silly, and I don't. I mean, I love it when I hear people refer to it as the War of Northern Aggression, and I always have to remind them, like, was Fort Sumter a Confederate fort? Because I'm pretty sure that was a Union fort that you
Yeah.
guys shelled, and
Bombed.
and you guys. The funny thing is, they could have like not started a war and kind of like coasted for
Oh
a
no,
while.
but yeah, they did. Yeah, right.
But it's weird. The flag, I kind of am like, I have no personal affinity for the Southern Cross because it did symbolize essentially a rebellion against the United States, and if someone were to refer to it as a traitor's flag, they wouldn't be wrong. At the same time, however, that same flag was painted on the sides of tanks in Normandy, and so it does become a question of what that flag means to the people flying it. Oftentimes, it does mean nefarious things. Sometimes it does. If somebody says, "Look, I like this flag. My father, my great grandfather, fought in the Civil War, and it just means my family's martial heritage, and I don't consider it to be
yeah,
racist."
that's great. It's just that my great grandfather would have died under that flag.
I
And
understand.
again,
Yeah.
Going back to Germany, Germany actively says the Nazi flag is wrong, and anyone who flies it we denounce. And I think we kind of got away from the whole black on
Yeah, I
black.
know. It just went on a
But
tangent.
I think that just goes to the greater point that there is a lot of problems,
well, and,
not only in
and,
the black community, but in trying to solve the problems of the black community.
Well, and in all fairness, after the shooting at the church, the flag was removed, and it was removed
Some
with a
places,
majority vote.
Yeah.
I think that's the only place where it was on an official state building.
Right.
I think there's still some debate over whether it should be at memorials or
There's still some like sitting senators that have it in their office, but that's
It's like, I don't care where you fly as long as it's not flown in an official capacity. But
and
yeah,
I can sort of I thought when they were like taking Apple games off of the store because it was a Civil War game and the Confederate side had their flag in the game and they're like, ugh. Or like when the Dukes of Hazzard was canceled or like they stopped running shows of Dukes. That's where it gets a little silly and that's just SJW sensitivity at that point.
but I do think as black people were promised reparations back in the day, they should have got something because
An
like,
acre
'cause
of land and a
part
mule.
of our problem was because like look, like, when black people got out of slavery and like for a long time we had a strong community. It's only like the last 100 years or so where stuff started to slowly crumble. But I think if they got out of slavery and had enough to be self-sustaining to start their own stuff, I think we wouldn't have fallen, back into this. Because remember, they basically went out of slavery and went right into sharecropping.
Well, I just saw a video of Martin Luther King from the 60s where he said, we still haven't gotten our acre of land and mule that we were promised by President Lincoln.
Right. Mm-hmm. And if we were never promised anything, then we'd have nothing to complain about.
Yeah.
But we were promised something and America backed out
Here's
of
the
it.
thing about reparations, in particular the slavery issue, and you run into sort of a moral dilemma here, right? Because to offer reparations to blacks as a whole from whites as a whole is kind of immoral in the sense that there are no whites alive today that participated in slavery and there are no blacks alive today that were
I'm not
slaves.
asking for it from whites. I'm asking from the government.
Right.
But
See,
by
that's-
definition,
No,
that would
no, it's the government.
but that-
It's its own entity.
but
It's
it
not a
has to
person.
tax
Right.
people for that
But
money.
that sets a dangerous precedent, though, because what that says is, from now on the world stage, whenever any of us, like for example, let's use the comfort women because that's totally neutral for us. All Japan has to do is wait 50 or 60 more years, and then say, well, look, that was the past.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but remember, the stuff that you did then has effects now. Like things in history don't stop at that point.
Yeah.
It's like throwing a pebble in the water. Those ripples go
Yeah.
out. And it is. I mean, it's not the only problem because and I'll say this in other videos too. A lot of our issues at this point are on black people.
Yeah.
I won't say us because me and you
No.
do not
Yeah.
fall into
No.
that. But a lot of the problems could have been solved
Yes.
if they had just if they'd even say, we'll give you a half acre of land per family, that would have been enough that I don't need to go into sharecropping. Just give me enough to get started, because from the inception of my birth, I wasn't allowed to learn or read or learn anything. So give me enough to get started, and I'll go from there. But they didn't get even enough to get started. So it's like we haven't really had that kind of even playing ground.
Okay. Well, here's the thing: if you were to argue that people who were slaves in the United States after being freed should have been granted reparations by the government that legalized slavery, I would say absolutely. But my problem is when people say that future generations have to pay reparations to other future generations for crimes that they did not commit, and for crimes that were not committed on them. And of course, a lot of people say all blacks. Well, is it necessary? Is it blacks?
I think it should be like with the Native Americans with the blood quantum. It should be if you can prove that your family was held like for example, my great grandmother was a slave. She was property, but we never got what we were promised. For my family, that's 4 generations back of having to climb the way out of the hole, and it didn't really happen until my dad did join the military, and that was his way out. It's not as long ago as people like to think.
Well, and I want to end on this, Armin. You said you have a problem with people giving reparations to future generations that didn't have direct involvement in the incident that caused the need for reparations.
Mm-hmm.
So was Germany wrong in giving reparations for the Holocaust?
Well, if it's directly to the people
it hasn't been. It's been the families of the victims.
I would argue I don't know enough about their program or their plan, but I would argue if they were...
Look it up. It's good.
I mean, but if I were to argue that if they were taking taxpayer money from people who were not Nazis and giving it to people who were not in concentration camps, I think I would have a bit of a problem with that.
Okay, now... okay.
If I'm being consistent, right?
Mm-hmm. No, because if it's equal for A, it's equal for B.
Yeah, and to me, my point is, generally speaking, it's like in a court case. If I hit you on the street, right? I run you over with the car. You are entitled to reparations from me because I hit you. But your brother or sister are not entitled to reparations from my brother.
And you can't pay those.
But what if I hit you, knock you out, take you to my house, make you work for me, make sure you don't learn, and then not only you but your children and their children and their children and their children, and then say, and then my great grandkids like, but we're good, right?
Well, yeah, I actually no. I again, my argument is if we're talking about taking money from slaveholders in the South and giving it to slaves from the South, or even let's just say their direct family.
I think we just had a breakthrough. Because there are still companies that were funded from slavery around today. So we just came to a breakthrough because we just take the money from those corporations that have made corporate slaves out of white, blacks, and everyone. Take all that money, give it to everyone.
Well, again, if there's a clear
we just solved the problem, people.
If there's a clear example of a crime being committed against somebody else, I'm all for it. I'm not saying, but again, my problem is this sort of collective punishment thing, and collective compensation thing. It just doesn't work for me. It goes against everything I believe.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's a matter of like collective punishment. It's more of righting a wrong on an entire people. Yes, a lot of us have gotten out of it, but the government did hamstring 13% of the people.
But to be fair, there's also been affirmative action policies, and there have been quotas, and there.
But see, a lot of we are coming to a close.
Yeah,
but
we'll have to wrap this up.
But a lot of that it doesn't always help the way people think it does, and nowadays it's not really so much as black people; it's more women.
Well, I don't think affirmative action has been good for the black community in particular, but I mean,
There's been a lot of things in this country.
There's
that
been a lot of
haven't
things that have been detrimental to the black community, but I could be here all day speaking
Yeah.
about that.
But
Ronald Reagan.
but I know you have to go. Oh no,
Reagan.
we're gonna leave it at that point. So if you'd like to hear the conclusion of this,
Is this going to be a thing where we're like about to get into like a serious argument and you cut it off
Anime.
right there?
Look.
Like last time it was going to be like the 3/5 compromise.
Right.
Now it's going to be Reagan.
Yes, it is.
What?
I have learned from the greatest of anime peoples. This is how you do it. You
It
wait
is.
until you
Yes.
wait until Goku is about to use a spirit bomb, and then you go next time on Dragon Ball.
Chicago.
So next time on Educated Black Man plus one guy
Yes.
named Armin.
Yes.
But yeah, please, if you want to keep hearing us, debate stuff, because we're not like other people on the internet. We're not yelling at each other. We don't hate each other. We
No.
are friends, and,
Yes.
and together we are going to fix all the world's problems. Because once we're done saving black people, we're moving on to people who picked Team Valor and Team Mystic, because they're also very handicapped. So we're going to work on them.
We'll either save the world or complain about it a lot.
Either way. But thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe down below. And until next time, we've been your hosts, David Clark.
Cedric Harris.
And Armand Gasparini.
We'll see you later, guys.